You know, what was it that made you feel alive, particularly in that Scandinavian tradition, or the how was it the first time it played on you, like, oh, this is something that's calling?
The Nordic thing, like
Yeah.
what? Hmm. Do you know? I'm not. I don't. I'm not sure when it sort of slowly grew on me because there was a point where because as you know, but maybe not listeners, I grew up in upstate New York, and there was no, and this was before the Viking craze. So, and if you didn't grow up in Scandinavia, and I don't really know how aware people were of Nordic stuff in Scandinavia, even in the 90s and the early 2000s, but in upstate New York in the 90s and the early 2000s, there was just it was just this nothing, this exotic. I couldn't even say exotic. It didn't you didn't know about it. And I had because of a number of things in my childhood and with my family background, I was already very interested in religion and very interested in spirituality and very interested in the idea that different ways of being through living through mythology and different religious structures or whatever you want to call it will create a very different way of being in the world. I was already aware of that when I was a kid because I was able to compare the evangelical Christian part of my family to going to Mohawk festivals in stuff like that with my grandfather, and 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 just also being, I had a few neo-pagan friends, or I had a teacher who was Wiccan when I was in junior high, and so I was already aware that there are very different ways of being, and I um I remember I I remember there was a series of things that happened to me. One was we had to do a family history project for school, and part of my background is Swedish. And so as a 12 or 13-year-old, I knew nothing about Sweden, except for like Swedish fish, the candy and Nordic tracks and just boring stuff in my mind, furniture. But I remember while I'm doing this researching into what is Sweden, and I remember there was this very romantic, sort of stupid picture of a Viking ship on the waves, and the clouds made the faces of these gods. And a light bulb went off in my child brain where I was like, once upon a time, these people in Northern Europe, they were also something that was attached to the earth, that was perhaps similar to the that which you see in the Native American stuff, and and also as a kid I loved Indiana Jones, so I was aware of the very bad representation of Hinduism, and but I was like very excited about these things, and to see Scandinavia, it's been wiped out perhaps, but I that fascination began there. And then I started this was very early internet days, so you couldn't find anything on the internet. So I was going to libraries and digging into and what little I could on the internet just to learn about Old Norse religion. I got a few what books I could on the Norse myths, and there came a point over the next few years where because it resonated with me in a way where I felt the like it wasn't about, I didn't care about Vikings, or I didn't give a shit about Vikings. I was fascinated with diving through these myths to see a world where people interacted with where the nature was alive, where Scandinavia was alive with spirits, and birds could be gods, and birds could speak to you, and animals could be an animal or a spirit or a, and there was this connection to my own understanding of what little of my own indigenous background I have, and also just earth. I don't want to romanticize too much and say that pagan religions are all nature religions, because they're not. But around the world they are connected to the here and now in a great way. And I don't, there was never one light bulb. There was just like little light bulbs after little light bulbs after little light bulbs. And by the time I was an adult, graduating high school and going to college, I remember at a certain point saying to myself, I don't even know if anybody reveres the Nordic gods anymore, but I remember saying I love them. And this is for me. It wasn't about worship, or it was about love. Um, and I think, yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
No, it's great. It's great. I can hear it because it's like I can hear it in my own self too. Did you feel that there was a form of there's a form of kinship with gods that sometimes get drunk, sometimes they fall in love too easily. They can be quick to anger. There's a sense of kinship in which you are they feel quite a bit like family, you know,
mm,
like when you meet your uncles and aunts. And to me, for me anyway, has always been my impression of, particularly in relationship with the gods, is that they are a very familiar beings that
mm,
have lots of human traits,
mhm.
which sometimes is a necessary thing in order to understand ourselves. So
Yeah,
they just amplify. If they fall in love, they fall in love completely. The whole cosmos is disturbed. Or
yeah.
in all of that. So I can hear, I can hear that love. But now, when you discovered this, did you foresee that you were going to create an art form around this, become an academic around this, and actually carve out a life around this? When did that start to happen?
Little by little.
Right?
Um, I was a I was a troubled youth. I was a bit of an angry teenager. I got into a lot of fights. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Um, um, but I knew I loved literature, mythology, history. I knew those were things that just grabbed me. And so I sort of at a certain point was like, I wasn't very good in school as a kid, but that's because I didn't care. But if I cared about something, I became obsessed. So I started to go to college. At that point, it was just your associate's degree, to just dabble and see, you get to take a lot of electives on mythology, on history, and liberal arts and stuff like that. And let's see, I don't know what I want to do with my life yet, so let's go with it. And I fell in love with the act of researching and uncovering knowledge, and particularly saw it as an opportunity with assignments and stuff to dive deeper and deeper into ways of think. I don't want to say Norse mythology, sometimes Norse mythology, but other times just really get into the ways of thinking and being that people had, not just in Scandinavia, but in Europe, and really any chance I got anywhere around the world where it's it's um it's where the earth is still agented, it would just grab me. So that grew. At the same time, I've always been very artistic, like minded. Like I was always into art and crafting and creating and making up songs to myself. And um, I was very into metal, and I formed or I joined a metal band, and I mean my first metal band. This was when did we form? I don't remember. In my early 20s, and we were called. I mean, I called us. We were named Fenris Maw, so
Ah,
mouth Mouth of Fenrir,
Yeah.
and it was death metal, and I remember at that time thinking to myself um, about how metal was is very heavy on Satanism, or I
Mm.
mean there's also the Viking stuff and the pagan stuff, but I wanted to like I remember thinking to myself, there's bands like Behemoth, right, that are described as satanic, but when you're reading their lyrics, they're drawing from Mesopotamian and Hellenic, and they're drawing from all this sort of stuff. And I was like, I could do that with Nordic stuff. And so, so Fenris Mall was all about like sort of weaving Nordic stuff into this very uh, I don't want to say anti-cosmic, but because it wasn't really, but it was like the vessel, the anger vessel, the destruction vessel, and that was in my early 20s. But um, I also began to I wish I knew how old I was. It was 2004, 2005. I met people who were also through heathen for the first time, and discovered that there was a pretty big community in the Northeast United States. And I started going to events and meeting people, and very quickly, uh, I wasn't satisfied with the bloats. I remember being really disappointed with bloats that I experienced because I had been studying in my mind, Nordic ritual involved chanting and singing and beautiful idols of gods and shrines that are, you know what I mean? Like what you would imagine, or what I imagined.
Yeah,
And
yeah, no, sure.
and instead you're standing in a circle in somebody's living room and they're passing
Hymning, yeah,
yeah, and they're
humming.
passing a horn around and they're
Yeah.
toasting gods, and I was just like, this is not my thing. I love these people, but this is not my thing. So I remember after my first bloat, started thinking about ways that I wanted to perform and do rituals, and so I guess I would say tw 2005 or six, I started really diving in deep with developing not not just developing, but weaving what I understood. I don't know, just researching, developing, bringing together the artistic and the spiritual and the knowledge into one thing. So, and
So would you say that your performances are somewhat of a mix between ritual and music, that you are bringing the ceremony into the onto the stage now, and or is that something you're keeping separate? We see that a lot in lots of other areas, especially around this culture, that a lot of people do ritual performances on stage.
Hmm.
Is that something that you're also picking up?
Um, well,
Because you did a Galder, I think I heard you did.
yeah.
You've done some Galder work. You've done some things from the sources
Mhm.
into onto the stage, right?
It depends. Well, I'm trying to think
Mm.
how I would answer this because I do well. It also depends on how you define Galdur,
Right.
but I do. Yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing because I refer to these sort of repetitive mantra-esque
Yeah.
chanting.
Exactly.
It's Galdur for me, and
Yeah.
I do it. I do it in my bloats. Personally, I mean, the easiest form of ceremony I do when I'm by myself is chanting and while performing small things. But on the big stage, well, I mean, I bring music and performance into bloat. Uh, and been leading ceremonies and performing bloat for upwards of 200 people, well, 300
Yeah.
people in Thailand.
Okay. So
But that
right.
wasn't on a stage.
But you kick off. So you kick off the bloat, and then you say in between. Well, let's say you're starting the bloat, and then throughout there could be a performance, there could be something else going on, and then it ends after that. So your performance is part of a bigger bloat that's in the background.
Uh, I don't know. I have to clarify if we're talking about when I'm on stage with a
Well,
band.
let's say before you go on stage, let's say
Oh yeah.
you say a prayer before you go on stage. Let's say, right? So
Mm,
so by the time you get to the stage, you're in a bloat,
mm,
uh,
yeah,
retrospectively.
I see what you're saying. No, I don't do that. And the reason is, although I've got when I'm doing bloats
Hmm.
and ceremonies, they're they are thus far not on a stage at a musical event, for example.
Right. Okay.
They
Okay.
are me organizing or being asked to, they are me performing a ritual. So just to give you a quick touch on, when I performed a bloat in Thailand, it was for 300 people, and it was I went with Hailung because this group of people had asked Hailung to come and perform. They asked Hailung to perform a ritual as well, and Hailung said basically, um, or my understanding from Hailung, I'm not going to put words in their mouths, but as I remember, unless I remember wrongly, they told me, that we said, no, we keep private rituals, and what we're doing on stage is that's a performance one thing. If you want somebody to
Get
do a
it.
private ceremony, you got to get somebody else. And I get they suggested me, so I was doing the ceremony, the bloat, as more like it was the spiritual, or whatever you want to call it. It was in its rawest form a religious or spiritual ceremony. It wasn't on a stage. It was outside. There was a big burning fire. There wasn't a microphone. There wasn't, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
wasn't a performance other than the fact that, ritual is performance. So
In
when I do
Thailand,
bloat,
that's just amazing.
yeah, but when I do bloat, I mean, I'm running a bloat here in a few weeks, and it's down on the water and stuff like that. But when I'm on stage doing music, um I mean, the current band I'm in, my main band is I mean, we're a black metal band. So and while that is very much a part of it is an expression of me spiritually and my worldview. It's not a bloat. So I don't say what we do on stage is a bloat,
Yeah.
but it is for me in many ways informed.
Hmm.
But yeah. So
This
that
whole
being said,
black metal, there is a black metal philosophy, isn't there, really? It's something that's kind of passed me by. I mean, I grew up with it myself, but it's over the years it's kind of passed. But I come up against it from time to time. That there really is actually in the background of black metal, there is actually quite a strong philosophical background. There is something that comes out of black metal. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
I can for
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, because there is I mean, the problem with black metal, which is like, I mean, it's my thing, but one of the biggest problems that I have with the not black metal itself, but the culture around black metal, is there's so much policing of ideology and what is proper black metal. And there is, I'm with that to a degree, but I think that, you're gonna find people who maybe listen to my response here and say, "Oh, that's not true black metal, because true black metal is anti-cosmic," you
right.
know. Um, uh, but black metal has always been, uh, uh, I would say that's one end of black metal. But I think that what black metal is, and how I see it, and honestly, I don't care if people say what I'm doing is black metal or not. It's what I care about is that I'm expressing myself. That being said, it's often classified as black metal, and I'm fine with that because I listen to black metal. But for me, I would say that there are very strong currents within black metal, and one of them is that it's very subversive, um, and that it is very very Loki-esque or Lucifer-esque, you know, or Satan-esque, where it's in the way that you've got the hegemony, you've got the way things are, and black metal is that subversiveness that breaks it, that goes against it. And so it is very confrontational. And now how a band is subversive or confrontational, that's going to come down to the band. But I think that there's a thread within black metal where it's very the outsider or the border crossing, breaking the rules, or inverting the way things should be to create something new. And so that can be very anti-cosmic. A lot of bands
Yeah.
are anti-cosmic. But I also think that black metal is very by its nature, it's very misanthropic. Um, and I am quite misanthropic. So or at least part of me, you know, we're always a few different things. So I need for me, black metal is it's like I need that black metal or I need that vessel that is my band Nexion. I need that to be able to get out certain anxieties that I have, certain energies and angers and misanthropic things that I have. I need to get them out that way to say things or to direct certain energies. But that's a very different, it's still me, but it's a very different aspect of me than what I'm doing in also through bloat, for example. You know, so because I feel that bloat or how I perform bloat and when I'm teaching about stuff, it's about reconnecting and creating a sort of healing. Bloat is about gift exchange. It's about connecting and healing and growing. And black metal is an exercise in destroying. And I think both are necessary, but I don't do them necessarily together, if that makes sense.
Fascinating. The feeling I get when you're speaking is very much, you know, Urgelmir, the roarer, you
Mm.
know, that kind
Yeah,
of breath in which
yeah.
comes from such deep inside, and
Mm,
that breathing and that kind of the thing that's coming through. It
mm,
feels very Tours-like to
mm,
me. It feels like a hurricane. It
mm.
feels like we're in the elements of giants, when primordial feelings that are
Mm.
necessary to bring out. I was recently. I like to reenact Ymir's roar, you know, in
Mm.
when I tell the creation myth, and everyone has too many neighbors in order for it to be done. But I'm like, come on, let's do this. So we bang on some drums and just try and reenact this, and
Yeah,
it's so liberating.
yeah,
And I can just imagine just put a few bars on there and a bass and some drums and just
yeah,
keep going. And you have takeoff, but you
yeah.
also have something necessary. You know, it's you can say that the roar is our first mantra, is our first. It's like the first thing we do when we're born. You know,
Mhm.
so it feels to me that it linked back to something uh, something necessary. We need to scream
Mm.
more. We need to
Mm.
roar more. And so when you're speaking, it feels like in that way, black metal can be quite liberating.
It's very,
Yeah, liberating, and suddenly you're standing in a cosmos. Not you're putting something out there with your own free will, but also your own all of that energy that you possess, and you just let it go. It's
yeah.
yeah,
It's a form of it's a magic. I mean, and I've
yeah.
said to people because we're creating, I mean, we're manipulating everything around us when we're performing. We
Mm,
are manifesting
mm,
something.
yeah,
I mean, with my voice and with the bass and the guitar and the drums, we are actively impacting the people listening to us. We are actively changing their experience of the world around them. We are performing magic. And and I think that's a very powerful thing. We are creating something that almost has I wouldn't even say we're creating it. We're bringing forward something that creates a life of its own that we're just a small part of. And it's very powerful. So, and this is where things get really interesting because we're talking about modern spiritual creative ways of approaching source material that's very old, right? So with all of my looking into Galdur as we understand what it could have been, and then weaving that into my own way of thinking, the way that I interpret Galdur, it is, I mean, it is very clearly vocal magic, if you want to say incantation or whatnot, and so in that, I think that if we look at this, the way I like to compare, it's not a mantra. Mantra means very specific things, but I like to. I mean, there's a reason why people do mantras because they do have a power, that repetition, certain syllables, certain sounds. And when you look at the magic inscriptions that we find, they're so alliterative and they are repetition. And so for me, Galdur is certain, it's often repetitive, usually concepts or ideas or sounds. I mean, I actually have, I mean, I do Ginunga Gap as a form of Galdur. Ginunga is very, you can chant it in certain ways where it's very, in Gap var Ginunga,
Oh, yeah.
um, it's
It's got a
very,
rhythm to it, actually.
it
Yeah.
very much has a rhythm to it. And so for me, for me, it's something that I would use in what I would call my Galdur practice. But I have other things that I have lots of um, prayer, incantation, Galdurs that I do. So for me, Galdur is it's that act of repetitive recitation of certain ideas or words or sounds that manifest certain things, whether it's in the environment or yourself. I know it's a very loose translation or
Great.
interpretation, but
It's great. And you know what's fascinating? This is obviously sort of outside of some of the boundaries of what we could. This is more of a speculation. But what's fascinating is when you do Yuginungagap Galder, is you put 4 or 5 lines onto a piece of paper or onto the wall or onto anything. Like in India, you would have what's called a yantras. So you'd have a shape in order
Yep,
for the chant to then have a shape. So when you see the shape, you connect that to the chant. And
exactly.
I know within Icelandic, the medieval, these medieval Icelandic shapes that you find. What I would love for them to have songs, for them to have chants, uh,
Mm,
and because I think that's when you're connecting the physical lines. I'm avoiding calling them runes for obvious reasons, but
you're talking about the Galdrastafir.
yeah. But imagine
Yeah.
if they, to give them the songs, and I wonder. I've always thought in my head whether it was something that one can bring in as a form that so you have the Galdar and then you can sing the actual shape. Because the feeling I get is that when you sing a shape or when you work with Galdar, it opens up certain parts. It opens up certain currents, and
Yeah.
you feel things, right? So
Yeah.
just like yeah, and
100%.
it's I'm very curious to see how we can use in my own work. I'm curious to see how that can be used to say protect a river
Mm,
or
mm,
protect a forest or protect a mountain from mining. Using it as yes, it can be subversive in a sense that it stands up and says this far but no further to something that's polluting the rivers or mining the mountains and things like that.
mm.
I mean, could you see the Galder being used in that form, in that shape,
Yeah.
activist like?
100%.
Yeah.
Because and actually to backtrack a little bit,
Mm.
because you're referring to adding sound to symbols,
Yeah.
and what's interesting about runes or even the word rune is that and as we understand the runes is that word probably originally meant secret or mystery, originally runes may have been incantations without symbols. That they were and this is why, this is why, for example, in Hávamál, where Odin is listing different runes, these aren't necessarily equated to something written. So the idea here is that you've got an oral society, and the power originally of runes is in the incantation. Now you start to get symbols, and people start to associate those symbols with certain powers or incantations. I think that, and I like to point out that, religion and spirituality, whatever you want to call it, but I'll say, you look at religion, all that it is, I mean, if you remove it's made up of all the different art forms that humans have. I mean, you've got the visual art, you've got the musical art, you've got poetry, all the literary art, and you've got all of those elements are involved, and they're there for a reason, because these are what move us as humans. Art and spirituality kind of, it's very hard sometimes to tell the difference. That's why somebody will go to a musical event and say it was a spiritual experience. Now, to Galdur and using its power to directly sort of impact the world, for example, is a protest to protect a river, activism. And
Yeah.
I think activism is important.
Mm.
And I think whether it's Galdur, or we could use Galdur, or Stavir, runes, visual imagery, or oral, to protect. I think there's got to be a way to, I think you tap into moving people. And that's, like I said, art moves people. Good art moves people. And if you can move people emotionally, because the only way you're going to protect, for example, a river, is you're going to have to get people on your side. It's the only way you're going to do it. And so I think that the power there is it's in the, I hate to say it's in the aesthetics, but it's in being able to move people and
Yeah.
get people with you. If you get enough people screaming a Galdur at a, and maybe holding up banners, or I'm not sure exactly how to bring it, but I do know that you can use these things to protect a river, or a fjord, um, by tapping into people, by emotionally moving them. And I think that's important, because that's actually, that touches on a thing that has always been really important to me, which is what kind of one of the core reasons why I do what I do, and my spirituality is that that there are different ways of being in this world. You might not be aware of it because it's sort of just how you are. Um, and right now, we are becoming more and more aware that there are different ways of existing and being, and they might clash. The indigenous animist way of existing, of which we have lots of indigenous anthropologists now who are saying, look, we have a way of being and relating that is different than the Western hard objective, this or that sort of way of being. And I think that you can teach people all you want that polluting a river is bad, but the moment you start giving that river life for people, and they can relate to it, and they can emotionally connect to it, that's when they move, I think.
And
I
would you think, pushing on this, do you think that an incantation to a river, in a sense that you evoke the river by
mm,
singing the chants? So it's a form of evoking, it's a form of bringing that life out.
mm, mm,
Um, and I mean, this is speculations, but you were saying before that that's probably the thing that came first.
Mm.
before before the lines were drawn on the cave walls or on the wood or on the granite. So the chant was a way of facilitating the animacy of the thing, of
Yeah.
facilitating it, giving it almost its name, its nature.
Mm.
And that when you think like that, it brings the Galdr back into history, almost to songlines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Australian songlines. It brings it back into that, the mantras and the rhythmical way of alliterating something to bring life, to bring that personality out. So there will be a specific Galdr for that river that you
Which is
only
very similar. What you're describing is also
to
you're
the
touching
Sami.
on.
Yeah,
Yes, I was going to say
yeah,
to yoiking.
yeah, yeah.
Um, um, and I think you're 100% correct. I also, and this is speculative, um, but I have always had this strong idea that when you look at the history of Scandinavia, for example, um, the difference between what is a Germanic or a Nordic person and a Sami person, these are political boundaries that were drawn over years. There were certain, and it started with the fact, I mean, it goes back to, I mean, there was always differences. People in this valley who are agrarian are seeing these people and calling them various names. However, we know, we know for a fact by looking at the genetics and the settlements that people were much more the boundaries between what was considered the Salmi or the whatever the Norwegians or whatever different groups of people, it was much more fluid. But once Christianity starts coming in and converting people, and once you start getting, and before that you have true nation building, who converts and sort of solidifies into one thing first? It's the people who aren't traveling. So the agrarian people, whether they identify as Sami or not, are becoming Danes. Well, there were no Sami people in Denmark, but but you know what I mean. And now you fast forward through time. Today we talk about the yoik. The yoik exists among the Sami, and this is. But I think if you go back in time, the Sami have preserved and in many ways shaped it to become a part of their identity. But I think that yoiking has a common root, a common ancestor in the songs of calling forward things that would have probably been pan Nordic, but became preserved and sort of solidified and further fleshed out among the Sami by their becoming identified as one group of people versus these people. And I have a sort of an example, or not an example, but some evidence for that is actually in the Sami practice of Tuganda.
Mhm. Yeah,
Oganda is
yeah,
to curse.
yeah,
Yeah, it's to curse, and it's if you were to Google
yeah,
Oganda, it's identified as it's a Sami thing,
yeah.
and yet the word is
Unless you read the Lord of the Rings, though,
yeah yeah yeah
you
yeah
get the Gandalf, the elf.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
The word Gonda is Old Norse. So that word, that name for what they're doing
yeah,
is a loan word from Old Norse. So this already shows that they're, I mean, I actually, one of my biggest pet peeves is that in our field, my field, the Old Norse religion studies or really religious studies or cultural studies, there's this idiotic line drawn between like for example, why are we comparing Icelandic texts to Denmark? I mean, we know that, but not looking at, Finno-Ugric practices that are maybe 100 kilometers, like bordering on certain civilizations or
yeah,
communities in Sweden and Norway. It's ridiculous.
yeah.
It's an absolutely outdated way of thinking where people thought that culture groups and language groups, but we know that proximity is more important. People share ideas even
Fascinating.
if they don't share language.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
That's
so I
amazing.
know it's
That's
a long
amazing.
rant, but my point
That's
is
amazing.
that
No, that's amazing. I need to absorb this. Give me a
yeah,
sec.
but my point is that I
What
think
you're saying there is amazing because the Finno-Ugric line has different roots from like the Indo-European line that we mostly associate with Celts and Norse and all of that.
linguistically, yes,
Linguistically, it goes completely east, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, it's fascinating.
but
Yeah,
genetically people are mixed, and
yeah,
people share ideas with their neighbors, and I mean there's Sami practices in the early 1900s that researchers do look to um I think one is there's a deity called Thorgalis or something like that, where they would have an idol to him and they would have nails driven into it and stuff like that. And researchers will often point out the similarity to this and the reknaklur, the god nails driven into posts of
yeah.
an
Trees.
idol of gods.
Yeah.
And the point is that researchers are beginning to look at Finno-Ugric and Sami stuff as a way of understanding the Nordic way of being. And
Fascinating. That's
yes, and the
amazing.
yoik thing, man.
You're opening up a horizon for me here. It's something I've never considered. I've always fallen into the trap that the Finno-Ugric is a very distinct thing. That this intersection that you're talking about is absolutely fascinating because there's so much richness in that area as well. Mm-hmm. Like going back to the joik, is it also the case that when you are joiking, you don't joik about the river, you are joiking the river.
The river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a distinction from writing a song about something. Here we're talking about, or for those who are listening, we're talking about actually really embodying and being the river whilst you're joiking the river.
Yeah. My understanding of it, and I've done quite a bit of research, and I was recommended some I think it was a PhD thesis on yoiking by I forgot his name. A Sami, a guy who is Sami and a pretty renowned yoiker, who is also a professor at I think University of Tromsø on indigenous people.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's quite an elder.
Andy something.
Yeah. I think I know what you mean. Yeah, I can dig out his name. Yeah.
Yeah, he recommended to me a number of sources and I dove into them.
He's a professor, isn't he? He's a professor. Yeah.
And he gave me a number of sources on yoiking to help me really understand it, because it was something that I wanted to really see what of it might inform what I do. And that was one of the big things about yoiking is that you're not singing about a river, you're singing, you're bringing forward the essence of the river. In the same way, and so people will do it, and there are different ways of yoiking. Some are much more mundane, others are much more spiritually potent, or whatever you want to call it, where you are yoiking the spirit of the bear, of the wolf. But then there's also people they're given their own yoik, and so from their family, and they might get another yoik, another name later on that's a yoik. So it is the essence in a way, and that's why yoiking often will it doesn't follow the same melody as what you might think of, because it's bringing forward, it's evoking images. So it might be, I mean, Andy, I wish I remembered his last name, Andy, this gentleman who is a
Professor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he yoiked. I watched him yoik the mosquito, and it was
Wow.
very buzzing and annoying sounding.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So
there's a form of signature then that it's a sort of sigilization of sound. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just thinking out loud. It's a bit like the sound suddenly has a shape and and a feeling to it, but
Mhm.
each joke is personal to each person. But you
Yeah.
said some jokes can be passed down as well.
Yeah, I think so. As I understand it,
Yeah.
I know that for people will be given their yoik when they're a child, but it may change or they may take on other ones as they grow older from other people. So, yeah, and I
Okay,
think
so
that.
here's the big thing to to bring this together with the Galder. Do
All right,
you
yeah.
think, yeah, because what you're opening up here with this kind of bombshell about fig nougat, which is great, love it. Is I'm having to absorb this. I have to ruminate after our talk. I just feel like what you've said is you're binding it to the Galder, because you're forming an embroidered sense here that they would have been connected at one point, that the Galder would have been similar to the joke, or am
This
or is this too much of a leap of
This no th well, if it's a leap that I'll be blamed for because it's my own idea and theory, and I haven't published anything on it yet. So, there might be some professors or there might be some researchers out there going, no, but
yeah.
I also know there's gonna be plenty that agree with me because I've pitched it to some colleagues and but it's one of those things that's as a lot of things in our understanding of Old Norse religion, you're going to debate forever
Yeah.
and not be able to figure it out. But I do believe that there's a common origin to what is right now called the yoik and incantation practices among the Scandinavians who lived who were mixing who were once a part of this mixing pot of
Write a
people.
book. Come on, get your
I
book out.
I have
I
one.
mean, what I love
You got
about
things.
what I love about your reasoning here is that you have a foot in the academic world, which is you've got the the periphery of not Wikipedia writing, but you know what I mean,
Yeah.
sourcing everything, being
Yeah.
appropriate. It's great. That's really important. And
Thanks.
then you also have this kind of a wildness around it, which can really infuse, I think, a lot of energy into the academia.
Mm.
And I really hope that your fascination for these things, inspiration for these things, I just hope that academia doesn't leave you too bitter. I've known academia in the academics. It can become quite quite a periphery that becomes suddenly smaller and smaller. That you keep these speculations, you keep these ideas growing. I think it's fascinating.
Well,
Uh,
I think that, I mean, what you're pointing out, I mean, I have a bitterness, but it's actually a
yeah,
bitterness towards academia,
yeah,
for a lot of reasons. Yeah, because I am very turned off by the ivory tower and the structure that's there. And I mean, I was having a meeting with my advisor 2 days ago about we're getting towards the end where I'm gonna have to defend my thesis and such,
is
and
that a
we
doctorate you're doing?
a doctorate
Wow.
and we were talking about how my background is not in anthropology. It's in literally my master's degree is in Old Norse religion. I moved into anthropology so that I could talk about um the relationship between what we're doing, what I'm doing, what you're doing, what Ausatru people are doing, and the Old Norse, what we know of Old Norse religion. And we were talking about how she was just saying how, because I will have to debate people.
Yeah.
That's part of the defense. And we just need to be really sure because some researchers from various schools, they're really, really hard sticklers for what is technically anthropology and technically sociology. And I'm like, I honestly can barely still tell the difference between these are, and I don't
That's
care.
amazing.
But there are people who it's these stupid lines. It's in it and it's I don't think I don't know. To me it's I'm not interested in that. So the wildness will remain because for
Right.
me the research is an ends to a mean, which is that I believe that Old Norse religion is relevant, very relevant today, but it will take knowledge, and we need to have the knowledge and the wisdom to allow it to be relevant in knowledgeable ways, in healthy ways, and we, as opposed to just slapping it on like a coat of paint on top of what's already a
Yeah.
postmodern, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean,
So
there's something amazing in this in the field that we're in because we've got such scant sources, right? They're really, it's not like we're in Greece here,
yeah, yeah,
and or India for that, or
yeah.
even or Asia. So we've
Mm,
got the scant sources. It leaves a lot of fun, a lot of up to the imagination of what things could
mm,
have happened, and everything. But I've noticed in my work that I sometimes get caught up in making meaning or myth making, meaning making for everything, and it feels to me more and more that we are meaning making animals. We're constantly trying to make meaning out of everything.
yeah.
And I think that's definitely has entered into the communities that we surround ourselves with. And
Mm,
I don't know in particular which direction it will go, but there seems to be a lot of richness, even though a lot of stuff is crazy out there, but there's a lot of richness also brewing. Like there is a lots of people are gathering in places, but there seems to be fertility, like
mm,
potential happening.
mm,
I hope that it stays incorrupt, that it doesn't become corrupt
mm.
for some weird reasons. You know how you can become suddenly corrupted by something. Money usually corrupts it.
Yeah, gurus, cults of personality,
Yeah,
money.
that's the
Yeah, yeah,
thing. Exactly. Egregores, which they
yep.
call, gurus who become, yeah, that's the problem.
I
And
think they're the biggest threat right now,
yeah,
and
well, you see that in the in the brackets of the shamanic cultures,
yeah,
the kind of New Age shamanism, neo shamanism,
yeah.
that has all of those troubled things. So, yeah, what would be the best piece of advice that you've ever received around this?
Oh no. Wait, around what particularly?
Around the way in which we can make culture happen without corrupting it, without bringing in the that whole plastic shaman, that saying of that happened in the night, the
Yeah.
what would be the best piece of advice to basically to create meaning, create mythic meaning, live through the rituals, the ceremonies, all of that. But what would be the thing to keep it under a certain track that it doesn't become a heap of fantasy in the end?
And I don't know. I haven't gotten any good advice on that myself,
Mm,
but because you're not going to be able to, the problem is I've got a direction.
yeah,
Um so the you're not going to stop the guru wannabes and the plastic shamans, and they're gonna, and I wonder if half of them know that they are one. I hope that I'm not one, but power corrupts, and corruption, like power corrupts, and I mean we see it in social media. Once you start getting likes, you start,
yeah,
people will sacrifice everything for that fame and
yeah.
that potential to be seen as important by people. And I don't know how to stop those people. All I can say to everybody else is that Old Norse religion is going to take on many, many different forms of meaning and around the world. However, and that's okay, you're not going to find one truth.
Mm.
Um, but we all need to be aware that like I think you need to ask yourself, what kind of religion or spirituality do I want, also true or heathenism or whatever you want to call this, where do I want it to go? Because it is moving in a trajectory. It is, whether you want to be conscious of this type of religion you're practicing or not, the also true or the spirituality you have is creating and maintaining a way of being in this world. And it's going to take it's very hard to self-reflect, and that's why it's going to take us as a movement to sort of help, like sort of find that direction. And I think the direction is towards, we know that Old Norse religion was the form of religion that modern indigenous religions are. For example, it was, the animism catchphrase was a big part of that way of being. There's so much written now on that, and we should be, I think that there's much to learn by looking at and talking to and exchanging with indigenous people, for example, and Aboriginal
Yes, yes.
people, and I think that and I'm not saying the way is to look to them. What I'm saying is like we kind of know what direction well, at least I know what direction I want
Yeah.
Old Norse religion to go in, which is that I want it to become a way of upholding knowledge of interacting with the world and being in the way that indigenous religions or animist religions around the world are. If that's the direction that you want it to go in, and I think most people do, I
Yeah.
think most people do, that's why it's been slowly going in that direction, then we need to be conscious and aware of what we're doing. And I think that we should also be very aware of cults of personality and allow yourself to feel the ecstasy and allow yourself to feel the wildness and stuff, but also make sure you're not that you're not just following somebody at their word, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
and make sure that what you're doing is for the better of your community, not yourself, I think.
Yes. That's right.
Um,
You know what comes up to me when you speak like this is the image of the can. The can, in the hari, which is like you staple stones together.
hmm,
So if you think of a temple,
hmm,
so let's say if we're going to make a temple, we're going to make an ancient temple. Let's say you and I will make a temple. Then
hmm,
I'll put one stone down,
hmm,
and you'll put one stone down.
hmm,
Someone else will come around and put their stone, and then we'll build this bad thing,
hmm.
this humble thing,
Yeah,
but it will be a can.
yeah,
But the only the only influence I have on it is that one stone that I've laid down. That's
hmm,
my stone, and you
yeah,
have your stone, and someone else. So in a way, it needs to be built with that sense of foundation. I think
yeah,
that gives it strength. But the trouble is going to be, obviously, every stone will look different and have different shapes. But the
hmm,
basic foundation, I think, needs to have before you can make a proper mead hall. You need to have that, people to come together and just to be able to build a can together.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
already but that image is quite, because that's an ancient form of that's an ancient form of a shrine, the
hmm,
can,
hmm,
and it's often a guide, as you know, when you walk up in the mountains,
hmm,
which directions to go.
hmm.
I remember in Iceland, though, when I was there, those extraordinary cans they have that
Yeah,
you're not allowed to touch,
no,
and you have some messages in them. I forgot the bone crone something that
I don't
lives in the
remember.
can.
I don't remember, but
Yeah, people can leave a little. You can leave a message in the stones.
yeah, there's
Forgot
a
the
number
name.
of sites like that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
cairns where there's a spirit in the cairn, or
that's right.
there's a story associated with it, and you're supposed to get out. Some of them there is, I forgot where, there is a place where you are supposed to get out and put a rock in the pile.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think
so
as the Old Norse religion, I find that is a very powerful symbol of what it can become. It can
mm,
become a can. It can become something that people build together, but not. It shouldn't. I sense that you probably would agree that we can't build a perfect meat hall. It can't be a perfect can, right? It's going to have issues. It's
mm,
going to be problematic. But but the shape and the getting the will of doing it, it's rather fascinating to get
mm.
together and to do something like this, which is already happening.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I
think
see it
so.
a lot in Norway. I mean, do you think, I live in England, right? So I have a different perspective now. I don't live in Sweden anymore. But what is it? How is it Scandinavia? How is it up there? Because there's a lot of creativity coming out. Bands are being formed. Wardruna is everywhere. All of this stuff. Is there a change happening, you reckon, or is it very conservative as it always has been up there?
I mean, the my from what I have seen, and
Mm,
I mean, I've spent my time in Norway,
mm.
so I can only speak about Norway
Yeah.
really. But and Einar from Vardruna. I
Mm,
mean, he is a part of the Norwegian Bifrost, the Åsetru
yeah.
organization here.
Mm,
Um, what I have seen and heard from people is that it is developing and it's moving in certain directions or in a direction, but you always have it's like one step forward, one
oh yeah.
step backward, and a lot of arguing because not and this goes to kind of the Cairn thing. I was
Mm,
thinking about it and I was like, I would like to be able to do that, but at the same time, you're going to have to also acknowledge that there are going to be people who are going to stand there and say, I don't like that, Karen. And then you're going to have to say, well, then you're going to have to go over there.
and build
But
another. Yeah.
yes, because you're not gonna get everybody on board with what you're trying to do.
Mm,
Not everybody, I sometimes get very frustrated because I'll post on my page something and I get a lot of support, but there's always people who
mm,
don't know what the fuck they're talking about, arguing with me and condescending as well. And it's very often people very married to either something that was published 30 years ago and it's become their entire truth,
oh
uh,
yeah.
or they've been practicing something or were told something
Yeah.
for certain many years and they cannot accept that perhaps there's another way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what I like about Norway and the also true here is that there are many people who are very actively experimenting
Yeah.
and they're not afraid to which actually kind of goes back to one of the things you had asked me, what advice do I have?
Yeah.
Um, one of the beautiful things about this type of religion, and I mean, it's brand new. So, I mean, we're just, but the beautiful thing about the sort of religions that we're inspired by is that they're not doctrinal.
Yeah.
So you can, we're in that stage of experimenting. It's not a cosmic crime to say, I don't like doing bloat this way. I don't like passing a horn around and doing a toast isn't my thing. I would rather give offerings to something and sing a song, or you know what I mean. It's not a crime to experiment and start doing that.
Mm,
And I think that that is really what we need to do. And the advice what I would really give is that experiment. When you learn new things, it doesn't mean you were wrong before. It just meant you didn't know what you know now. And we're always growing. And like we as the knowledge base that is heathenism are also true. It's slowly growing as more we need to grow together.
yeah.
And which means we need to be open to experimenting and saying, ah yeah, we did that 30 years ago, but that we were that was totally off, or let's rethink how we think about things or redo things. And if we can do that, then we can build a cairn and
Yeah.
we can then step back and go, yeah, the cairn's a bit crooked. Hey, why don't we change some
Yeah.
things?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of people in Norway who are uh, doing that.
Yeah, because the image of a can is humble enough, I find, rather than if you and I were to build a mead hall, we have Grendel everywhere, right?
Yeah,
You would, and the more beautiful the mead hall would be, the more trouble you
the more
create.
Grendels there are. Yeah.
Yeah, the more Grendels you will get. So I would find that at least with the can, it's something that okay, it isn't has enough democracy in it to become a manageable symbol as a shrine, as a relatable shrine to all the differences of Old Norse religion, and
Mm.
probably also as a very original piece of marking for something sacred,
Mm.
whether it's a grave, the can graves, the stones,
Yeah.
um, the röse out there.
Mhm.
So yeah, as you were speaking, that image of all laying a stone each, at least then you can speak on behalf of your stone, right?
Yeah, and also the cairn is made from local stones.
Local stones, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so my if I design a bloat
Mm.
and it's entirely my way,
Yeah.
um, there's no horn, um, and there's no hails. What
Wow.
there are many stages of it. So you know, I, there's many steps.
Right.
Um, but because I like ceremony, and I think that bloat would have had ceremony, would have had these steps, and I start off by sending out gratitude, and I've got my own recitation. I mean, I send
Nice.
my thanks to, you know, the great eagle and the four winds, and the waters that flow, you know, from, and I send my thanks out to the animals. It's I
Oh, I
send
think I've
thanks
read this. You published something like this on your Facebook. I think I've read something about
maybe.
this. Yeah,
But
very beautiful.
I send out gratitude,
Yeah.
and then you know, there's incantations and chants to sort of set the stage. Primarily there's idols, there's an altar, there's a place to give offerings.
Okay.
Um, I will call on the gods through song.
Mm.
So there's a few different songs, but I'm skipping through the steps. But the point is, it doesn't involve hails. What it involves is um, communal singing, chanting, while giving offerings, whether to a fire or to the idols themselves. I do splattering, like hluyt, what I would call it.
Yeah.
So I do splattering of idols and objects and altar and people, because it de- the splattering can be water or clay or mead or blood, depending on the context. And to me, that's a very unifying thing. Also, you know, there's a lot of elements, but no, there's no hailing. In fact, one of the things about my bloats is that there's really not any space. There's no talking. There's no individuality within it. It's a group of people paying honor to a gods or a god. There's sometimes washing idols or decorating them, but it's a group of people paying homage to a deity or something like that. And so it's usually call and respond,
Mm.
singing or stuff like that. At a big event, there might be so like I said, like the bloats can change. I mean,
Because the
what
big one is in Midgard's bloat is a huge bloat, isn't it? That's
yeah, but that's not my bloat,
okay.
and I wouldn't. Uh, no offense to it.
It's the folk bottom Nordan Vinden, isn't it? Who make it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, but it's at a metal festival, so
Oh yeah,
it's,
yeah.
you know, so it's sort of like this. It's like I know that the people who do it, Benny and Gustav,
Mm.
it's very powerful and for them. But it's in mixed company. You know, it's at a metal festival, so it to many people it has tremendous meaning for them.
Mm.
Um, but Midgårdsblot, ironically, considering the name is Midgårdsblot, has made a very public stance that they are not of any religion or spirituality.
Oh, I
So
see. Okay.
this is very interesting sort of.
Oh, that's funny. So that happens somewhere. That happens next to the
No,
festival.
that happens right in the middle.
Oh, it
But
does.
so it's like this weird talking out of both sides of your mouth type of a
Oh,
thing,
funny.
you know?
Trying to tick all
So
the boxes. Yeah.
yeah, but their blow is, I think it's getting, it might be very, I didn't see it this year, but I know that as more and more people have begun to attend, it's gotten more difficult to do it in an organic sense.
I see.
Um, but the ones that I have seen, I thought that they did a quite a good job, because you need to blow any ceremony, it needs to adapt to the circumstances. And so
Mm.
when you've got 2,000 people, you know, I mean, I love they tell stories of the gods and they do certain things and then they splatter the idols and then they leave a bowl there and they let people go up, and one at a time people will do it, that gives each individual person their own. I think it was a good way to allow such mixed company and so many people to find a way to be involved and on their own terms,
Mm. Mm.
you know. So
That's a huge lesson. That's an amazing, amazing thing to have gone through, because that's really what we were saying before. How do you manage all these things, all these currents? And so that's a big lesson. What
mm.
would you? I mean, I would love to. Would you want to share some of a bloat song?
No, I'm not gonna sing.
No, not
No,
sing, but
I'm still losing my voice.
no, not maybe not singing, but just some phrases, just some Old Norse phrases.
I mean, to be, let's see, with pop, since I'm put on the spot here. Um, I mean, well, the most basic, most people know this one, but I have a melody to it and everything, and I think
Oh,
well, I'm not going to give you the melody,
ah,
but you've already heard it, but it is the perfect, I think, welcoming prayer to the gods, and we're so lucky it was preserved, which is the Sigurdrifa Mál, Heill dagur,
yes, yes.
heilir dag
But
sinni.
I thought you this is the hail one for me. You know, hail
Oh,
the day, hail the
well,
dog.
but it's beautiful because yeah, but this is a song, and I don't,
Yeah,
not everybody does it, you know.
yeah,
It's like we will sing because you're calling. This is the way of, in for me, this is
mm,
how, this is one step in the blow,
yeah.
after we've done certain things. The fire is lit, the offerings are set up. I do a certain thing where I appease Loki, and I actually ask the fire, if we're doing a fire, I will ask the fire to do its task, which is to deliver the offerings to the gods. And I've got a chant for that. Um, and then we call the gods. And this is I mean, what better way is there to,
Woo!
and
Fantastic.
yeah,
Can it? Do you
keep
want to? Do you
calling
want
on
to?
it.
I love to hear it. Love to hear it.
What? I'm not singing it.
The Sigurfilmol. Yeah, yeah. Just hear it in that Old Norse growl. Great.
Oh, and I just say, no, but I
Yeah,
mean,
you can say it.
yeah, it's heill dagur, heilir dag sinnir, heil nótt og nift, og reiðum augum til þókar þinnig og gefið sitt jöndum sigur. Heilir æsir, heilar ásinjur, heil sjáin fjölnitja fold, mál og mannvit gefið ókar þinnig og læknis hendur meðan lífum. Yeah, so, and then, one thing that I have it's a mantra, or a galder that I really get, it's an easy one to get the crowd or people doing, is ways of chanting Til árs og fríðar, because that is also I mean, it's short and it's easy,
Mm,
but it's beautiful, for a year of prosperity and peace,
mm.
and you see it everywhere in the source material, and I think that it's a very good, so that's a mantra or a galder that I get people
Oh, you
chanting
repeat Tilors og Fredur.
in Thailand, right?
Yeah,
Well, because sometimes if I'm doing a bloat with people that know, then
yeah.
but if I'm doing a bloat for people that might not know what to do, this is very, so in Thailand, many of them can't even speak really English, but I taught them how to say Til árs og fríðar, and then it was so cool in Thailand, after all these offerings are in this fire burning, and 300 people are all just chanting Til árs og fríðar, and they're just doing it over and over in Thailand. It was beautiful, and
Beautiful.
and and I think that's what I want with my bloats, is it's not about the person, it's about us together with the gods and the spirits, and creating a wholeness, and sort of losing yourself in that. So
Next time you're in London, you must come down to the Downs. We've got the South Downs here. It's full of beautiful,
mm,
and yeah, we'll build some cans. We'll do some bloats.
yeah,
Be
yeah,
great.
yeah.
It's been
Karen is a really good.
absolutely. I wish we could. There's so much about what you opened up there, what you've said. Lots of really interesting things to ponder and to ruminate. And it's so great because you're taking your academia work and you've got that sorted, you've grounded in that, which is really important. Plus, then you can take this into the stage and share it in that wild spirit,
I hope
which is medicinal. I mean, it's nourishing, right? It
100%.
helps. we need it. And you said it in the very beginning that it's important to do it for your own well-being.
The black metal I need, it's
Yeah.
cathartic,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of other people need it because it's the anger and the rage and
And that's what I've heard a lot. Yeah, it's a place where your anger can be expressed, and that is, you know, ask any kind of psychologist under the sun, they'll be like, oh yes, we need more of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
Instead of shouting down the local
Exactly
down at the local shopping center, you know, scaring people.
And I've said that, like, I think I've said that Nexion is like, I think I've described this, I think I said something like, where the jaws of the wolf are on the throat of the world. And what I mean by that is that, you know, there are, if you were to really talk to me about what I think about the world, I think we're fucked. I think we're fucked, and I'm very pessimistic about humanity. I just am. Very bitter and angry in a lot of ways. But I can't give up. I love nature. And I have moments of joy, and I love certain people, and I can't just, you know, but I need to be able to teach people how to heal and allow myself to heal and connect to the earth and do ceremonies to the gods and do that healing aspect. But then I also need the part of me that, you know, says, you know, this species deserves fire. You know, the jaded, angry part needs to bring out that. And I think I do it in a way that hopefully, like the new album, I can't talk too much about it, but I described it as both a curse and a prophecy. And it's about, you know, the potential bad direction that mankind is on, and do we kind of deserve what happens to us?
But you see, this is the thing, right? So if you're an alcoholic and you hide your whiskey in the cellar, yeah, then you're screwed, right?
Yeah.
But if you bring out the bottle in front of the table, like you're saying, you're bringing out the rage, you can then negotiate with something.
Yeah. And that's
But if all this stuff is hidden, like you know, and hidden, kept away, then there's no negotiation. You can't negotiate with the wolf or this. You know, so releasing this. Yeah, the word is cathartic. That's what I'm hearing, and you know, I mean, look, it takes courage to go your path, and I really, it's great to see it happening, and I love the fact also of the background in which all the story of your life. It's great, and I'm really glad to have had this moment to have a chat.